Notre Dame is rolling right now after winning 5 straight, but every great team has to prove it can handle success, and the Irish have a great opportunity to do just that against a rival in Boston College. We've got your full preview and predictions coming right up.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily home for Notre Dame football. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum, producer at Fox Sports, and I've been covering the Irish the past 5 seasons. Thank you for joining me here on Thursday, October 30th, and for making this your first watch or listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. And be sure to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to drop your questions for the Friday mailbag in the YouTube comments or hit me up on social media. The X account is at Locked On Irish. The Instagram is at Locked On Irish Pod. On today's show, we're getting you ready for Notre Dame's trip to Chestnut Hill to take on Boston College. I'll start with what you need to know heading in the matchup and what's really at stake for Marcus Freeman's team as they try to keep their playoff hopes alive. Then I'll break down Boston College on both sides of the ball, why Bill O'Brien's offense can't seem to find a rhythm, and how their defense is completely falling apart. And I'll share my keys to the game for Notre Dame on both sides of the ball. And finally, we'll wrap things up with a quick look at special teams, and I'll explain why I expect the Irish to take care of business in dominant fashion. But what you need to know. Well, kickoff is set for Saturday, November 1st at 3:30 p.m. Eastern inside Alumni Stadium. There is a trophy on the line in this one. And honestly, the only reason I know that is because of the NCAA football 26 game on EA Sports. I kind of grew up learning about these different rivalry trophies. Like we obviously all know about the Jewel Shillelagh, but there is a trophy on the line. The Frank Leahy Memorial Bowl in honor of legendary coach Frank Leahy, who coached at both schools during his lifetime. Roy Philpott will be on the call alongside Brock Eisweiler on ESPN. And the forecast is calling for a beautiful day in Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts on Saturday. High of 55 degrees, little to no chance of precipitation, but it might get a little bit windy. They're calling for 15 to 25 mile an hour winds with higher wind gusts possible. So that might be something to watch in the deep passing game. But overall, that's football weather, man. 55 degrees and sunny. I'll take that any day. Saturday will mark the 28th meeting between the two programs, and Notre Dame leads the all-time series 18-9. Although Boston College did win the most famous game back in 1993 when they knocked off the top-ranked Fighting Irish 41-39 on a game-winning field goal there at the end of the week after Notre Dame upset Florida State in the game of the century. And the Eagles actually had Notre Dame's number from 1999 through 2008, winning 7 out of 8 matchups during that period, which seems crazy. But since then, the Irish have dominated BC, winning the last 9 straight, and they have won the last 4 games by an average margin of 30 points per game. Bill O'Brien is in his second season as the head coach for Boston College. He's a former Penn State head coach, also coached in the NFL with the Houston Texans, and was Alabama's offensive coordinator during Bryce Young's Heisman season. And he was actually hired to be Ohio State's offensive coordinator before the start of last season in 2024, but then he left that job during the same offseason to become the head coach at BC, and then Ryan Day replaced him with Chip Kelly. And I think it's safe to say that decision worked out. Bill O'Brien is 23-22 overall as a head coach in college, but he is 8-13 in his 2 seasons with the Eagles. And last year, in his first season, this was a feisty team. They finished 7-6. They had a nice win over Florida State at the beginning of the year. We thought that was a big deal at the time. Then Florida State's season went completely off the rails, so it didn't look as good in retrospect. But still, they were a good team. They were going to play teams tough, and I thought that this could be a tricky game going into the season. But they are 1-7 on the year, and they have lost their 7 straight games. Their lone win was over Fordham in the season opener, and they've had some close losses along the way, like they lost by 2 points to Michigan State, and they hung tough against Louisville last week, but they got blown off the field by Clemson. They got blown off the field by Pitt. Notre Dame is favored by 28.5 points on FanDuel, and the over-under is 56.5. So Vegas is projecting something like a 42-14 win for the Irish. So what's at stake in this matchup? Well, this might not be the rivalry game like USC, and I would not even put it up there with Michigan, but it's still a rivalry, and it definitely matters to the fans. There's even a trophy on the line, like we discussed, which adds an extra layer of meaning. I'm curious to see just how much Marcus Freeman leans into the rivalry aspect with this team, because given the history between these programs and the similarities between the universities, this isn't just another run-of-the-mill Notre Dame ACC matchup. And we know that Marcus Freeman likes to use any source of motivation that he can possibly find, so I think he's going to bring it up. The players probably don't know, nor do they care about what happened in 1993, but the people in and around the program do, and the Boston College game is always going to have a little bit more animosity. Now, on the field, this is about handling success the right way after winning 5 straight games and just taking care of business. A win over Boston College is not going to move the needle, obviously, unless it's closer than it should be, in which the needle is going to move in the wrong direction. But at this point, we know exactly what Notre Dame's identity is. They're going to run the ball with the 2 best backs in college football. They're going to stop the run on defense. And when defenses creep up, they're going to hit you over the top with C.J. Carr. And defensively, yeah, the secondary might give up a few chunk plays, but they're going to make you pay with takeaways. That is who this team is. That is who they've become. And the next few weeks are about strengthening that identity so that they are clicking on all cylinders by the end of the season. Right now, the Irish sit at 5-2. They're ranked 12th in the country in the AP poll, and they are marching toward a 10-2 finish that could put them right back in the college football playoff. It is not guaranteed, but it is absolutely possible, and I would say it's likely. Now, in order to get there, they cannot afford to take their foot off the gas for a single second. Even against an overmatched opponent like Boston College, every game is a chance to showcase why Notre Dame belongs among the elite, and they deserve a shot at the national title. Handling success has been a challenge for Marcus Freeman's teams in the past. We've talked about it. But last year, they proved that they could stay motivated. After that early loss to Northern Illinois, they regrouped and they won their final 10 regular season games. But one turning point that doesn't get talked about nearly enough from that run was the Stanford game. Now, if you don't remember anything about the Stanford game, I don't really blame you. It was a 49-7 blowout that was never in doubt, but it was the moment the offense flipped a switch. They struggled with consistency early, especially in the passing game with Riley Leonard, but after the bye week, they looked like a completely different unit. Riley Leonard went 16 of 22 passing in that game, and they moved the ball at will. Jeremiah Love barely played in that game because he didn't have to. And from that point forward, they started pummeling opponents and carried that momentum all the way to a national title appearance. Now, this year, there isn't one glaring issue like the passing game was for the team last year, but there's still certainly room for improvement. The defense had problems early on, but they've largely cleaned those up. On offense, though, red zone efficiency and short yardage execution still need work. They moved the ball at will all season, but have left way too many points on the board in tight spaces. And defensively, they may have improved across the board, but they need to get more pressure on opposing quarterbacks, and they need to limit the chunk plays downfield. Those weaknesses might not matter much on Saturday against Boston College, but they absolutely will if Notre Dame earns another shot at the elite teams in the college football playoff. So if the Irish play to their standard on Saturday and they clean up those details, they will win by 40+, maybe even 50+. And from that point on, they'll look every bit like one of the scariest teams in college football. All right, coming up next, we're going to dive into the full scouting report on Boston College. I'll break down why Bill O'Brien's offense has struggled to find any sort of consistency. Then we're going to flip it around to the Eagles' defense and explain why I believe it is one of the worst units in the country. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or just want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. So my preseason pick for the NBA, even though we're a few games in, is the Denver Nuggets to win the NBA championship. They're plus 700 right now. Obviously, the Oklahoma City Thunder are big favorites to win it all, and they're in the Western Conference. But you know what? I'm taking Nikola Jokic. I think he's going to get his second NBA title this season. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's start with Boston College on offense. And in addition to being the head coach, Bill O'Brien is also the play caller. It's something that he's done throughout his career, both in college and in the NFL, and he's had a lot of success as a play caller. but he has not had a lot of success this season. That is because he's dealing with an offensive line that he's had to rebuild on the fly. He has limited skill talent on the outside, and he is dealing with a litany of injuries across the board. Not just on offense, on defense as well. But for the sake of this discussion, they are very hurt on offense. They run a pro-style offense with a lot of play action and deep shots down the field, plus some RPO concepts, but the RPO stuff has more to do with which one of the two quarterbacks is playing. I'll get to that in a second. They're also going to mix personnel groupings. They're going to motion a lot to try to confuse the defense. It's a staple of the pro-style offense. It's what Tommy Rees did when he was the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame. But all that confusing stuff doesn't really matter because they just have not been able to execute. They are 76th in the country in points per game, but that stat is a little bit misleading because they put up 66 points on Fordham. They are 90th in yards per play for the season, and over the last month, they have been even worse in that regard. They're averaging just 4.4 yards per play, which is in the bottom 20 nationally. All right, some players to know. So quarterback, Grayson James, he is number 3. He is a transfer from Florida Atlantic, and he took over midseason for Alabama transfer Dylan Lonergan. So James is a pretty decent athlete, and he can move, but he's dealing with a leg injury that's hampering him. And Bill O'Brien admitted in the press conference earlier this week they may have to make a change at quarterback, and it is not due to performance. It is due to injury. So it seems like Grayson James is a true game-time decision, and he's a bit erratic. He had the highest turnover-worthy play rate among all Power 4 quarterbacks, and he looked really banged up last week against Louisville, but his running ability does provide a different element to this offense. Number 9, quarterback Dylan Lonergan is who started the year. He barely played at all when he was at Alabama, but he was a pretty highly rated recruit, and he won the job in preseason camp and actually started the first 6 games of the season. It started out great. They smoked Fordham, and then he had a huge game and a loss against Michigan State. He just had barely under 400 yards passing, had a few touchdown passes as well. But then he struggled mightily in the next 4 starts. He had just 1 passing touchdown to 3 interceptions, and then he got benched for Grayson James. At this point in time, I think that Dylan Lonergan is probably going to be the quarterback most of the day. But if Grayson James is healthy, then he's definitely going to get the start. It's just a matter of whether or not he can give it a go. Now, at the skill positions, they've got running back Jordan McDonald, number 5, transferred from UCF. He's been taking on more of a workload lately. Not a ton to write home about with him. He's averaging just over 4 yards per carry. He's got decent size, can run through contact, but it's kind of hard to run when their offensive line is as bad as it is. At wideout, they've got 2 players that are pretty interesting. So number 11 is Lewis Bond. He's their go-to possession guy, leads the team in receptions and receiving yards, all that. Veteran, captain, reliable hands, and he's quick from the slot. And O'Brien likes to use him on a lot of short routes because, 1, it's an easier throw for the quarterback, and 2, he's very good after the catch. When they try to go deep, it's often to number 4, Reed Harris. He's the big play threat. He's 6'5". Nearly half of his targets are deep shots, and he's got the highest average depth of target in the Power 4, according to our guy, Jamie Uyeyama from Irish Sports Daily. He is like that one guy that can really hurt this defense because he can go deep. He can create some chunk plays. So even if Notre Dame's defense is winning 80% of the time, if they get one big chunk play downfield to Harris, then obviously that changes the game for this matchup. Their strengths, they don't have a ton, but they are top 30 nationally in receptions of over 20 or more yards. So that's where they're going to try to hit Notre Dame. This is probably more of a testament to Bill O'Brien because he's really good at scheming one-on-one matchups and creating mismatches. So I have zero doubt that they are going to target Christian Gray a lot in this game. They're going to try to get Reed Harris on Christian Gray on the outside and probably try to beat Gray on a deep ball because Gray has shown he's susceptible to getting beat on the deep ball. I hope for Christian Gray's sake that these past 2 weeks have been good for him in terms of getting healthy again. Marcus Freeman even said he's been banged up all year. He's coming off the worst game of his career against USC. So this could be a big bounce back game for him because they're absolutely going to try him. Now, as for their weaknesses on offense, where do I begin? This offensive line is a mess, due in large part to injuries, like I mentioned earlier. Both tackles have been hurt. They're down to freshmen and some Ivy League transfers in different spots. They've already allowed 21 sacks on the season for negative 137 yards. That's 112th in the country. They've also allowed 44 total tackles for loss. So their backfield is just under siege basically every time they go out there. And when James gets pressured, his completion percentage drops to 32%. And he has a QBR that ranks dead last in the Power 4. That's also from Jamie Uyeyama. There is a case to be made that Grayson James is one of, if not the worst quarterback in the country when he's under pressure. It's that bad. Dylan Lonergan, a little bit better in that respect, but there's a reason that he got benched. Their run game, though, is really the biggest problem on this offense. They're 127th in yards per rush and rush yards per game, and they've had just 3 runs of 20 or more yards all season. 3. So they are not explosive at all in the run game. They are completely one-dimensional. They try to pass the ball, and even that is pretty inconsistent because of accuracy issues, turnovers, all of that. So the keys for the Notre Dame defense is pretty simple. Number 1, blitz all night. I feel like Coach Yost remember the Titans because that's honestly what Notre Dame should do in this game. Boston College has no chance of running the ball effectively on Notre Dame. 0. None. The one strength that Notre Dame has had on defense this season, even when things were pretty dire at the start of the year, was stopping the run. They're ranked in the top 20 in the country in opponent yards per carry allowed and rush yards per game. Notre Dame's front needs to make either quarterback uncomfortable early and keep their foot on the gas. And if they're able to do that, this could be a big stat game for guys like Boubacar Traore, maybe even Bryce Young, because a lot of people have been asking where he's been at. This is a game where he could go out there, get a couple sacks, build some momentum down the stretch, and maybe even Donovan Hinish, man. You know, I know a lot of fans criticize him mostly because of how he played against Miami, and he's a little bit undersized, but he's pretty good at getting after the quarterback. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a sack in this game as well. My second key for the Notre Dame defense, win the one-on-one matchups downfield. O'Brien is going to spend all game trying to scheme up those matchups against guys like Christian Gray, like I already talked about, plus Dallas Golden when he's in, maybe Mark Zachary because they're freshmen, and Devontae Smith if he plays because he has missed the last few games due to injury. He's listed as questionable at this point in time. But when they have their opportunities, those guys have to win those plays. I expect a lot of deep balls to Harris, some play action passes to Bond too, so that he can try to make some plays in the second level. And yeah, they might hit on 1 or 2 explosive plays, but that's the only way that this team can hang around. So if Notre Dame is able to avoid busted coverages, if they're able to make tackles at the second level, then they have a chance to just shut out Boston College. Boston College is going to put up a fight for all 4 quarters, and O'Brien might get the better of Chris Ash on some plays, but this is just a massive talent mismatch, and if the Notre Dame defense plays like they've been playing over the last month, this should be another great game for that unit. Now, flipping over to the other side of the ball, we're going to take a look at Boston College's defense. The defensive coordinator, Tim Lewis, did a pretty good job of revamping their defense last year in his first season, but they have taken a significant step back in year 2. They've lost a lot of production from that group, and they basically struck out in the transfer portal this offseason, and now they're one of the worst defenses in the country statistically. They're 131st in yards per play allowed. 131st. So that is not good. And over the last 4, they have given up an average of 492 yards per game. That's quite a bit. There are a couple players to keep an eye on. Number 15, he's their edge rusher, Quintavious Hutchins. He's a team captain, their lone pass rushing threat. He leads Boston College with 20 pressures. He's a good athlete, but he's a bit undersized, and if Notre Dame just keys on him, I don't think he's going to have a lot of success. At corner, Carter Davis, he started the season at safety, but then he had to be moved to corner because of all the injuries they have in the back end of their defense, and he registered 6 total takeaways last season, but this year, teams are targeting him often. They have a 139 passer rating when throwing his direction. I think their best defensive back and best overall player is number 2, safety KP Price. He leads their team in tackles. They'll try to do everything with him. They can blitz. He'll try to play the run, and he's pretty decent in coverage as well. And then there's safety Omar Thornton, who leads the team in tackles for loss as a safety, which is pretty interesting. But he is one of the worst tacklers in all of Power 4 play. He's missing over 20% of his attempts. So when we talk about the strengths for this unit, well, they try hard. That's the best thing you can say about this group. But like Charles Barkley said last week on Inside the NBA, they play hard as like saying you're going out with a girl with a great personality. That means she's ugly. Charles Barkley's words, not mine. But this group has been decimated by injury, and they didn't have that much talent to begin with. And Tim Lewis is not afraid to send the house to try to get after the quarterback, so maybe that could lead to some mistakes in this game, but CJ Carr has been great against the blitz all season long. Carr has completed 63% of his passes for 7 touchdowns and has a 109.5 NFL passer rating against the blitz. So if they try to do that, I don't think it's going to work out for them either, but I'm trying to find a strength for this unit. As for the weaknesses, let me just put it to you like this. The Boston College defense is in the bottom 30 out of 134 teams in college football in the following categories: points per game, yards per game, yards per play, rush yards allowed, yards per rush, rushing touchdowns allowed, tackles for loss, pass yards allowed, passing touchdowns allowed, opponent QBR, and red zone defense. That's pretty much everything. It's pretty much every major statistical category on defense, and they are in the bottom 30 in every single metric. This is one of, if not the worst defense in the Power Four. So the keys for the Notre Dame offense, CJ Carr, let it rip. Bill O'Brien said in his press conference earlier this week that if they can't stop the run, they have no chance in this game. So I am guessing they're going to try to load the box to slow down Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and try to make CJ Carr beat them because he hasn't played as well recently. He didn't look good against USC. He looked good against NC State, but then he had a pretty mediocre game against Boise State. USC was his worst game of the season, and I think if Boston College dares him and they play a lot of single coverage on the outside, this should set up perfectly for CJ Carr to bounce back. We've seen him do it. We saw what he did against Arkansas. He tore up the NC State defense when they sold out to try to stop the run. And Notre Dame's receivers have a huge advantage over these defensive backs, and the offensive line also has a clear advantage in pass protection, despite the fact that they have two new starters in Sullivan Absher at left guard and Joe Otting at center. So obviously Notre Dame isn't going to abandon the run entirely because even if Boston College does load the box, Love and Price should each get theirs. But if Carr gets you in a rhythm early, this could be like another Arkansas game for him where he's just picking them apart all over the field. My second key for the Notre Dame offense, they've got to finish drives. This should be a get-right game for Notre Dame's short yardage and red zone issues. Boston College is 111th in red zone defense, and I've already explained how bad they are just across the board on defense. And this was the most glaring issue for Mike Denbrock's unit going into the bye week. And I'm assuming they spent a lot of time figuring out how to fix it after they did their self-scout. And if they can't get it right against this team, then I'm not sure we should expect it to get fixed anytime soon. So this is a big moment for the offense, specifically in those short yardage and red zone situations. But overall, if Carr gets into a rhythm and the backs play like they've been playing all season long, this could be a name-your-score type of game. This is the game for the Irish offense and CJ Carr in particular to regain their confidence and start lighting up the scoreboard like they did earlier in the season. Okay, when we come back, I'm going to explain why this could be another big game for the Notre Dame return men, and then we'll get into my predictions. Today's episode is also brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. From footwork to breathwork, athletes fit all the details, and Mazda brings the same intention how we craft every model. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you could drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail. Because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda. Move and be moved. Now it's time to take a look at the third phase of the game, and honestly, special teams hasn't been a major storyline for Boston College this year, but they've quietly been solid overall. Their kicker, Luca Lombardo, is a big reason why. He is really good, man. He is a perfect 11 for 11 on field goals this year, including a long of 52 yards. And as Luke Smith and I talked about on Tuesday's show, opposing kickers just aren't missing against Notre Dame. There's been one miss against Notre Dame all season long. So if Luca goes out there to kick a field goal, odds are he's making it. And his consistency is a big reason why this offense for BC has been able to put up any points on the board as of late. And they also have a pretty good punter as well. He's a transfer from Yale, and you could make the case that he's been their most effective transfer really throughout the season. But a quarter of his punts are being returned. So that means that Jordan Faison is likely going to have some opportunities in this one. And I've been calling all year for a Jordan Faison punt return for a touchdown. He's been close a couple times, and he's been so good at breaking tackles. I just think he's going to get one this season. Maybe it's on Saturday. Boston College did make some noise on special teams back in week 1 when they blocked a punt against Fordham, but since then, they just haven't been able to be very effective in the third phase of the game. Their return game has been like a revolving door. I believe they have tried 4 different return men. Not one has been a true difference maker back there, and they have a freshman handling their kickoff duties, which is something that Notre Dame can relate to, although they just seem to kick the ball out of bounds every time they kick off now. But Andy Quinn, their kicker, is pretty solid, but about a quarter of his kicks have been returned as well, which is higher than most Power 4 kickers, which means, especially if the wind is in their face, and I said earlier, it could be pretty windy on Saturday, Jadarian Price could get a couple opportunities to run one back. And if he does return one for a touchdown, that would be his third of the season. I think he's going to get his third. I don't think there's going to be enough kickoffs in this game for it to happen, but I'm never going to doubt Jadarian Price. And I'm to the point with him where when he catches the ball deep on kick return, I just assume it's going to be a big gain. So maybe they just kick it out of bounds like Notre Dame does, but we'll see. I would not be surprised if Jadarian Price or Jordan Faison end up having a long return or two in this game. My keys for Notre Dame on special teams, it's really simple. I just got one. It's figure out the kicking game. Notre Dame has been great on special teams all year. They've had the kickoff return for touchdowns. They've had a punt block against Texas A&M. They had Jordan Faison out there doing his thing. Like, they've been really good. They've had fake punts too, but they cannot kick field goals. They cannot kick off, and they're struggling on extra points now. I just don't understand how they are so bad in this phase. I understand that Noah Burnett has been dealing with an injury all year, but they just have to be better. And they seem dead set on directional kickoffs, but they should just let Schmidt or whoever they decide to kick off just boot it as far as they can. I'm tired of watching these fly to the left side of the sideline and go out of bounds. It happens way too much, and it just doesn't happen for other teams like that. Now, hopefully for Notre Dame, they're scoring more touchdowns, and they don't have to worry about field goals, but it would be nice if late in the game, say Notre Dame is up, 39 points or something like that, the second team is in there, and then Noah Burnett has a chance to go out there and kick a field goal. Like, it'd be nice for him, and it'd be nice for all the fans just to see the ball go through the uprights, and hopefully that will instill some confidence into Noah Burnett the rest of the way, because those kicks against USC were just so bad. The missed extra point, the missed chip shot, it was all a disaster. And I understand the conditions were bad, but they've really got to clean this up. Now, that's not a real positive segue into my predictions here, but I'm going to change the tone here because I believe this should look a lot like the Arkansas game from earlier in the year. The difference is Boston College is not just going to lay down and give up in the first half like the entire Razorback football program did on that day in mid-September. They're going to put up a fight, but given all the injuries they have, the lack of talent, the lack of depth, there is just no way this team should hang with Notre Dame. On offense, I do believe this is going to be a get-right game for C.J. Carr. I would be surprised if he doesn't put up at least 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns in this game. I expect Boston College to try and load the box, contain the running game as best as they can, which means it should be a field day for the passing game. So I'm calling it now. Malachi Fields is going to find the end zone. Jordan Faison is going to find the end zone. And Eli Raridan is going to find the end zone for his first touchdown this season. They tried to go at him in the red zone last week against USC. It didn't work out at all. But I think that he is such a matchup nightmare for defenses. They're going to find a way to get him in the ball in the end zone. He's going to have his first touchdown of the year. He needs a touchdown, man. He's been way too productive to not have one yet. And also the fact that a Notre Dame tight end does not have a touchdown and we're nearing November is just, it's not right. The Boston College defensive backs don't really stand a chance against Malachi Fields or Jordan Faison, so I think their touchdowns will be a little bit easier. They're going to be open early and often in this game, and I'm actually not expecting a huge game for Jeremiah Love in this one. That's partially by design. Don't get me wrong, he's going to get his, and maybe it turns out like the Army game last year when Love had 8 total touches in that game, but he finished with 136 total yards and 3 touchdowns. If he breaks off a 68-yard touchdown run on Saturday like he did last year against Army, then he's going to get his yards. But I think Notre Dame is more focused on keeping him fresh during this stretch run so that they have him during the college football playoff because last year he was hurt during the playoff. Meanwhile, this could be another game for Jadarian Price where he just goes off. He's been a home run hitter all year, and he could have a Shohei Ohtani-like performance on Saturday because there are home runs to be had. And even though the Dodgers bats have just gone to sleep in the World Series, Shohei Ohtani has been just mashing balls when he gets the opportunity. He just hasn't had a whole lot of opportunities because the Blue Jays keep walking him. But that's talking baseball for this show. Defensively, Boston College probably isn't even going to sniff 100 yards rushing, so they're going to put pretty much everything on either a quarterback who got benched a few weeks ago or a quarterback who's been dealing with a nagging injury, going up against a defense that's been flying around, doing all sorts of damage, wreaking all sorts of havoc, picking off passes, all that stuff. So ultimately, yeah, I expect the Eagles to put up some resistance because they're a proud team, but this is a name-your-score type of game for the Irish, and the score that I'm picking is 52-10. All right, that's going to do it for me today. Thanks again for making this your first watch or listen of the day. Before you head out, please subscribe to the YouTube channel or follow along wherever you are listening to the podcast. Don't forget to like the video, rate the show 5 stars, and leave a review. It really helps more Notre Dame fans find the show. And consider this your last call for mailbag questions. If you want to be featured on tomorrow's show, you could submit your questions in the comments or send them to me on X @LockedOnIrish or on Instagram @LockedOnIrishPod. I'll see you Friday.